Ministers, Your Excellencies, dear delegates, welcome back for the fourth plenary session of the 22nd IISS Shangri-La Dialogue on Cyber, Undersea and Outer Space Defense Challenges. Obviously, countries have increasingly thought to develop capabilities and capacities across these domains and consider them to be critical areas for defense and security. And this panel will be our opportunity to discuss these issues and examine perhaps also the role of emerging defense technologies across this issue set and the very specific challenges that may arise from those technologies and in those areas. So we have three ministers to help us get through this theme and explain how they feel about it and how they think about it and what the national policy developments are. They are, to my right, Judith Collins, Minister of Defense of New Zealand, who is back at the Shangri-La Dialogue. We're delighted that she is back. Sébastien Lecornu, also back at the Shangri-La Dialogue, the Minister of the Armed Forces of France, and to my far left, Antti Häkkänen, the Minister of Defense of Finland, who is speaking for the first time at the Shangri-La Dialogue. So we will hear their interventions and we will then have time for Q&A, and I'm looking forward to your questions. But before we do that, Judith, if I may ask you to take the podium, the floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you to IISS for the invitation to speak on this panel today and for your efforts in facilitating another excellent summit here in Singapore. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak here alongside my colleagues from France and Finland at my second Shangri-La Dialogue. For New Zealand, our security and prosperity depends on secure global connections and lines of communication. We rely on free and secure global sea and air lanes, undersea cables and space-based connections to the world. And as a small state, we rely on cooperation between states and the international rules-based system as a whole to protect those connections. We used to think that our geographic isolation provided us with a degree of protection from security threats, even as it also caused us some challenges in terms of being at the end of global supply chains. Today, though, distance is no longer the defence it once was. The strategic environment is now more challenging than it has been for decades, and global and regional tensions are playing out across all domains. Just as we are concerned about increasing threats to freedom of navigation at sea and the security of cables under the sea, we are concerned that actions by some states and organisations are threatening security and stability in cyberspace and outer space. Cyber intrusions are an ever-present threat. Like many other countries, New Zealand's growing connectivity of devices and networks, alongside the adoption of emerging technologies such as AI and machine learning, has made our domestic cyber landscape much more complex. The increasing importance of space-based services is making satellites and their supporting infrastructure increasingly attractive targets for hostile action, despite the wide-ranging and deeply harmful impacts that could arise from the use of weapons in space. We are particularly concerned by reports that Russia is considering placing a nuclear weapons system into space. And looking back to Earth, I would note the increasing number of incidents where the undersea cables that connect us have been cut, such as in the Baltic. So how to respond to this increasingly contested nature of space, cyberspace and undersea? I would start by reinforcing that from the New Zealand perspective, cooperation between states and an effective and robust system of international agreements, rules and norms of behaviour are key. We need to work together to promote and protect our shared security interests. This cooperation needs to span the full set of national tools and capabilities. We need our intelligence and security services to identify and warn against threats. We need our diplomats to engage with each other to build trust and confidence and work towards international agreements that reinforce rather than undercut international law. And we need our defence forces to operate and cooperate to protect and promote our shared interests, to deter threats and to respond when needed with effective military capabilities. So I was very pleased to last month launch and release New Zealand's latest Defence Capability Plan, or as we call it, a DCP. And this is a multi-billion-dollar plan for a modern, combat-capable and increasingly lethal New Zealand Defence Force that pulls its weight internationally and domestically. Our new DCP contains planned commitments over the next 4 years, which will double New Zealand's defence spending. Innovation is a key focus of our DCP. We need to ensure that we're building capabilities that are effective into the future. And this is particularly true for the domains of space, cyber, and undersea warfare. Our DCP includes planned investments in a range of modern and emerging technologies that are and will be crucial for military operations in these domains. For example, it sets our planned investments in a range of space-related systems and a wider range of military cyber capabilities, and for the very first time in New Zealand, an uncrewed surface and subsurface maritime surveillance capabilities. And with the 4th largest search and rescue area in the world, we need them. These new maritime capabilities will focus on increasing our awareness of activities across New Zealand's vast maritime area of interest. Publicly releasing our Defence Capability Plan and a range of other national security documents is one way that we seek to build greater awareness and understanding of New Zealand's national security interests, objectives and activities. Transparency around states' defence activities is crucial to establishing and maintaining trust and confidence, enabling international cooperation, and in avoiding unwanted escalation. The space, cyber, and undersea domains are all opaque by their nature. It is vital that we make them more transparent. We do not want to see crises appear because these domains are misunderstood or because innocent actions are seen as creating an escalation. We do not want to see crises in these domains emerge from a lack of understanding. And of course, we ideally do not want to see these crises at all. So to that end, I would like to spend some time discussing, as an example, New Zealand's defence activities in relation to space. As some of you will be aware, I am also New Zealand's Minister for Space. I'm always excited to speak of the great work that New Zealand is doing in this area. New Zealand has always invested very strongly in international defence partnerships, and this is very much the case for our defence space activities. Space is inherently a global domain. No nation can work on space alone. New Zealand is now a major space launch state, and I'm very proud to say that last year we had the 3rd highest number of verifiable, successful vertical launches into space. We beat Russia, by the way, just want you to know. We're actively working with our partners to leverage our launch capabilities and our other unique advantages, such as a lack of immediate neighbours, to support our shared security interests. But much of our defence effort in space has been spent working with a range of states and multinational initiatives. New Zealand has been a member of the Combined Space Operations Initiative for nearly 10 years, working with others to contribute to defining responsible state behaviour and to removing barriers to defence space cooperation. Securing space requires that we know what is happening above our heads. The New Zealand Defence Force contributes to the Joint Commercial Operations Program, which uses commercially available information to monitor objects in orbit and support safe and secure satellite operations. More recently, we have joined Operation Olympic Defender, which coordinates the space capabilities of member nations to enhance the resilience of space-based systems to deter hostile actions in space, creating norms of responsible behaviour and to reduce the spread of orbital debris. From the middle of this year, the Royal New Zealand Air Force will reactivate 62 Squadron, our space squadron. Previously, 62 Squadron operated leading-edge radar systems during the Second World War. The squadron served in Bougainville and in the Solomon Islands, including the Guadalcanal campaign. In the 21st century, 62 Squadron will again turn to the skies. It's just going to be a little bit higher this time. To sum up, I would reinforce that just as is the case for the more traditional domains, our collective security is enhanced by cooperation between states. By an effective international rules-based system which allows small states to meaningfully participate through the support of a stable system, and by transparency about national objectives and activities. New Zealand has long been active in the Indo-Pacific to support security, stability, international law, and the freedoms of navigation and overflight critical to maintaining access to vital trade routes in the Pacific, Indo-Pacific. And we've done this in part through collective regional security arrangements, such as the Five Powers Defence Arrangements, and exercises such as maritime cooperative activity. Much can be taken from these activities into the cyber, space, and undersea domains, particularly the intention to work across borders to protect our shared interests and values, and promoting the norms and rules that we care about most. Thank you very much.
Minister, thank you very much for those contributions, and in particular for tying together your multiple responsibilities that are overlapping in a really constructive way for our panel here. Thank you very much. Sebastian, may I ask you to take the floor?
Dear friends, let me salute you. I'm going to speak in French because I have learned a lot from President Macron, but not his mastery of the English language. I want to thank again the organizers for the way they welcome us. Dear Bastien, dear John, with also a keen word for my predecessor, dear Florence Parly. Thank you for the choice of this theme, because 3 or 4 years ago, I think that we would not have had a panel dealing with that topic that directly. This year, we deal with it in the afternoon, and I think that unfortunately in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, it might even be the keynote speaker who will do his entire speech on that issue, because the breakthrough is very deep. And if I quote the speech of President Macron, he started and ended with it: if we have to devise coalitions of the independents, it is really on those topics that we can start working on them. I want to be quite blunt and start from what Judith said. She remarkably drew the lines. I want to share 4 points about those breakthrough, about these new disputed areas, with the suggestion made: space, cyber, and underwater environments, and maybe a 4th one, that is the information and manipulation of information, because it's not strictly cyber, but it is totally linked. What we see is that these environments are key for economic development, for our freedom, for our sovereignty, and more than that, these environments have no borders. They are borders without borders, because we are all sort of next to each other. It might be a little less true for underwater domain, but cyber creates a notion of non-territory, no borders. That's the same in space. And the other specificity is that these themes are linked to the civilian domain. And that's why we were not used to dealing with that in a rather defense-focused and security-focused forum. What is also quite striking is that, all in all, we are almost all equals vis-à-vis this threat, because as it appears, it's a nuisance which can be done between strong, from strong against a weak, but also from a weak against the strong, with the ability to attack another country is rather equal. If we compare that with the military capability of states, which can be extremely different in the traditional areas of conflict, conventional and nuclear both. But we can see that in those new fields of conflict, there is some kind of equalizing effect. Second point, these domains and areas are very difficult to monitor. And in that respect, we're not all equals. We can see that this requires the ability to master innovation, new technologies, research, that things are going very fast, and we're not all equal in that respect. Just between brackets, we see that the war in Ukraine has taught us that we needed mass of equipment, mass production of equipment, and other conflicts in the Middle East teach us that you need accuracy, high technology, and keep investing in research and development. So the two major conflicts of the time teach us that we need to be able to do both, which is a huge stake in terms of public expenditure. We cannot speak about new areas of conflict without wondering about investment. We are not equal because if you are a liberal democracy or not, the way you deal with those three topics is totally different. I'm not going to come back on that because Judith mentioned that. The third thing I wanted to mention, in these three environments, as I said, you can see that things are going to go increasingly fast in the future owing to technological breakthrough for those who master it and those who do not master it. That's what I was just saying. This relation between the weak and the strong is very worrying among the strong ones, that the notion of new space, that the notion of nuclearization of space, where you can see states able to master these technologies in a very fine-tuned and accurate way. They militarize the space very accurately, and other countries make choices, but they don't want to fall behind, like Russia, and they are ready to just break some taboos and make these domains even more dangerous than they are, with potentially nuclear weapons in space, which would be a total disaster given the number of satellites that we currently have in geostationary orbit. And this is going to gain momentum because in the 3 or 4 domains, the international law is just budding or inefficient. So budding or inefficient, we see what is happening at sea, where we increasingly see new frameworks of conflicts. You could see the Red Sea for the first time. You strike the sea from the ground. So that represents I will not come back on the challenges of maritime circulation in the Indo-Pacific. It's no longer just piracy, but hybrid threat, state-based things for the predation of underwater ground and materials, and also the attacks against the underwater cables, which convey 98% of data. And it's even more true in space. Even in the worst years of the Cold War, the blocs of the time managed to organize a minimum level of international law. You remember the first nuclear test in space in the 60s, but we also remember the major treaties between the United States and the USSR. And we see today what the major stakeholders of the Cold War managed to do. And today, the various stakeholders of the world are not able to do that because of multilateralism and all the crises that we see within the United Nations. So things are going to speed up, and that is extremely worrying because everything which was organized in international law, as the President said yesterday, is being questioned or just disappears. So you can imagine when conflict domains are not regulated yet or do not benefit from treaties yet. So it enables the stronger to keep going. And if I had to summarize our dilemma today, you can be defeated without being invaded, and you can lose the war without ever having been at war. So that's really a brutal new strategic deal compared with the situation we used to know. And here again, there are a number of threats which bring us back to nuclear proliferation, because you cannot deal with exoatmospheric space or the nuclear domain without seeing that it's very tightly linked. So what can we do to fuel this afternoon's roundtable? Well, first of all, we should not give up the ambition to regulate, to control. It's not because some countries won't do it or do not see the interest in it that all the other countries have to suffer from that, and that whenever there's a new, in every new adventure, you needed some pioneer countries tackling it. The difficulty is that it's not always militaries, it's often civilians. So major economic organizations need to accept to look at some military subjects, the ASEAN, the EU, and some military organizations, such as NATO, for instance, accept more to look at some civilian topics. It's a kind of a small revolution in our organization, because we were used in a very academic way. With every alliance has its own mission, let's not mix up the roles, but we see that it's the first thing we need to think about, the alliances and the way we make them live. The second point, to be quite blunt, it's only meaningful if the major stakeholder also show the will to do it. China, the United States, for different reasons, obviously, Russia, our Indian partner, the giants in the space domain, they must sit at a table and ask the right questions. And we need to collectively go around the table to ask the right question about what Russia is doing in terms of transfer of technology in those topics to all the disruptive countries, those who question the international orders, North Korea, Iran. And we are bound to mention the stake of terrorist groups, because we can see that increasingly this duality can lead us to have some private stakeholders questioning this order. Second point, we need to keep innovating, not to suffer from the situation. It requires industrial partnership. I see Guillaume Faury, the CEO of Airbus, in the room, the way to organize our alliances, trying to build champions, very huge companies, to suggest a new solution to the States. I'm thinking about crypto, post-quantum, artificial intelligence, new space, underwater robotics. All these topics are capability answers to the challenges we have. We are not foreign affairs ministers, we are defense ministers, so we can find operational solutions as well on all those points. And some of these projects will have to be led alone, because they will be linked to the sovereignty of each country, and we have to respect that. And for quite obvious reasons, other projects will have to be developed together. And that's where we work on this coalition of the independent that President Macron explained. He explained the philosophy of that yesterday. I would like France to progress on tailor-made specific partnerships depending on the capability requirements and regulation requirements. Very often we do it bilaterally, here with Singapore, on other topics with India, with the United Arab Emirates. We come back from Indonesia. You see the dynamics. And this dynamics goes beyond the EU. And it's paradoxical, because sometimes we, the French, go quicker with countries which do not belong to the EU than within the EU. And my colleague from the Netherlands might mention that later. That's a challenge for European Union members. And we should not forget our near neighbors, such as Norway, such as the United Kingdom. Norway is also a key country in that respect. And I think that we also need to think more civilian. Think civilian means companies, Ministry of the Interior or Public Security Ministry, domestic security, education. You cannot speak about information warfare, manipulation of information, if there is no interconnected relation with the civilian world. I'm struck by the fact that our military alliances deal with 20th century threats, and it's difficult to make these 21st century threats appear on the agenda of our current meetings, and thanks to the Shangri-La dialogue, because this is something quite rare. Last point, we have to think about our ability to retaliate. We no longer have to just suffer and accept. And self-defense in those new confrontation domains. This exists. This self-defense, legitimate defense, is not escalation. It's a means to deter, to discourage. And I will conclude with the notion of attribution, saying who attacks us, who is attacking us in the cyberspace, in space, by mining the approaches to Rotterdam Harbor or Le Havre Harbor, to creating access denial on commercial civilian ports in Europe. This raises questions. Sometimes we know it's quite obvious that Azerbaijan has directly manipulated information in our overseas territories in the Pacific to retaliate against our courageous, legitimate support to Armenia and to the sovereignty of Armenia. So attribution can be easy, but sometimes it's a technical challenge, a major technical challenge. And that's a topic for this coalition of the independents, to wonder who is attacking me, and can I publicly or privately pinpoint the origin of the attack. And here there is discrimination between countries who can do that. France will be one of them, and the countries which cannot do that. And to illustrate what President Macron said yesterday, we would like the majority of countries, actually that all countries are able to do that, because the least is to know when you are attacked. And this duality must be dealt with in the self-defense domain. That was for my contribution. Thank you for choosing this theme. Thank you for having invited me to participate in it, because the domains where we can speak very freely are not that numerous. So thank you very much.
For your intervention and for raising technology as an equalizer, but also as potentially a challenge and a destabilizing element when you mentioned the temptation to leap ahead, break taboos, to seek advantage in new and unforeseen ways. You also mentioned, of course, the non-state actors, both as a challenge and as an opportunity, given the dual-use nature of what we're discussing here. So thank you very much. There are lots of points that I'm sure we want to get back to, not least the offensive dimension that you mentioned there at the end. Minister from Finland, may I ask you to take the floor?
Well, it's a great honor and my pleasure to participate in the Shangri-La dialogue. And I first want to thank the IISS for organizing this excellent evening and Singapore for the great hospitality. And all the distinguished guests and speakers and panelists for the fruitful discussion so far. Although this fourth plenary session is about a very important theme, cyber, undersea and outer space defense and challenges, the current security situation in Europe is connected to these themes also, and that's why I will shortly address a couple of remarks on the European acute security situation. Russia has once again made an active decision to continue its illegal and unjustified war of aggression against Ukraine just recently. It has not shown any readiness for a solution which would respect Ukraine's sovereignty during these past weeks. On the contrary, Russia is continuing and even speeding up its warfare and also the hybrid warfare in Europe. Finland continues supporting Ukraine. It's crucial that the war will not end in a way that rewards Russia as the aggressor. Following the international rules-based order, complying with international law and respecting the sovereignty of other nations are core values to be upheld if we want to achieve global security, stability and prosperity. Russia has shown that it does not follow international law and the Charter of the United Nations. It is for that reason Finland has had to resort to reinforcing its deterrence and defense by not just increasing defense spending, but also joining NATO 2 years ago. This is due to our assessment that Russia will highly likely continue strengthening and developing the armed forces and also the hybrid warfare in all the domains. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine has underscored the growing interconnection between the Euro-Atlantic and the Indo-Pacific theaters. And China has enabled Russia's war effort in Europe, while North Korea has supplied Moscow with significant quantities of weapons and troops. The linkages go beyond having the same actors in both regions. Coming from the Northern Europe, I want to mention how the Arctic region links the Europe and Indo-Pacific together, as the economic and military interests are rising and drawing actors from the West and East. And finally, both the Euro-Atlantic and Indo-Pacific regions are experiencing intensifying hybrid operations in all the domains, including the sabotage of undersea critical infrastructure, activities that have occurred several times in Finland's proximity, but also in this region here in Indo-Pacific area. Circling back to the topic straightly of this session, the defense challenges in all these three dimensions, cyber, undersea, and outer space, are also examples of cross-regional interconnection. They are as relevant in the north as they are in the south, like we heard from the Judith earlier speech. Cyber as an evolving operating environment is challenging the international rules-based order every day. Threats have become increasingly diverse, with the cyber environment being used extensively in hybrid influencing efforts, also in crime, terrorism, and purely warfare. The role of politically motivated or state-led non-state actors as orchestrators of hostile activities, those both are growing. Breakthroughs in technology and the digitalization of societies increase the number of information systems and services connected to the internet, thereby making society increasingly vulnerable to cyber incidents. Cybersecurity is clearly a whole of a nation effort. We have to combine the resources and skills of government authorities and the military, also the private industry and business sector, as well as the research community. For example, Finland's model of comprehensive security has been a good basis for preparing to the hybrid influencing. Undersea dimension faces unique and complex challenges due to the difficult operating environment. For example, underwater drones are designated to be silent and difficult to detect. The increasing digitalization of vessels and other equipment exposes them to cyber threats and spoofing attacks. Undersea cables form the backbone of global communications, making them a shared strategic vulnerability. Dealing with recent incidents of damaged underwater cables in our waters in Finland, we have increased our preparedness and understanding on how to respond. Let me share a couple of key issues how to respond. Firstly, situational awareness, full readiness, and speed of response are vital. Secondly, smooth cooperation is key to success. Cooperation among carriers' national authorities, cooperation with cable operators, and cooperation with neighboring countries. Also, international organizations, well, in Europe, NATO and EU, they have been useful in dealing with the complex tasks of safeguarding our underwater infrastructure. Space is a fast-changing environment. It is becoming more contested and an arena for competition. Space has become a strategic domain and potential arena to trigger escalation in the future. Our modern societies are highly dependent on services from space, and its importance for modern warfare is also increasing. Today, nearly all weapon systems are somehow connected to satellites. This is a critical infrastructure we must be able to defend. We need to secure our access to space. On one hand, space is crucial for nation states, and on the other, it is common for us all. We are all maneuvering in the same arena. This means better possibilities to cooperate, collaborate, and to benefit from each other's strengths. And as a small nation in a high north area, Finland engages in cooperation with the Indo-Pacific partners through the EU and NATO, and of course, daily basis much more strongly also bilaterally. To sum up, the threats and defense challenges we are facing in these three dimensions are really complex and do not respect state borders. Their significance to the global peace and security is on the rise, which is why we need to continue open discussions like this and enhance our collaboration. I look forward to your questions and insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Häkkänen, for your remarks. And I think, as many in the room will appreciate, Finland is a nation that has perhaps longer than others thought about security challenges as whole-of-nation issues. And I think Finnish policy benefits from that when it comes to these specific domains and areas. So thank you very much. We now have time, about half an hour, to address a number of questions. We have already a long list of people seeking the floor, so we will, as previously, group a couple of them. Before we do that, let me just reiterate what has been said by Sir John earlier, that the current edition of the IISS Regional Security Assessment that is available to you holds a lot of data and analysis on these themes as well, so I'm sure you'll find it useful. Let me begin this round with Shashank Joshi from the United Kingdom and writing for The Economist. Shashank.
Thank you, Bastian. Thank you, ministers. You all talked about space. I want to ask about the United States' Golden Dome initiative for missile defense. Do you view this as an opportunity for allies, as a way of bolstering extended deterrence, or do you see this as a risk in terms of the destabilizing effect it may have on the nuclear balance, but also the spending it may divert away from conventional defenses? And in addition to that, it may introduce new counter-space capabilities. It may incentivize Russia to accelerate its program of developing and deploying nuclear weapons in space. So I'd welcome your assessment on that US initiative and how you react to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. David Ko from Singapore.
Thank you, Bastian. The question is directed to all members of the panel. Minister Sebastian listed many differences between the new 21st century domains versus the traditional kinetic domains or threats that we face. I'd like to add one more, and that is that the traditional kinetic domains are a multilateral conversation, a conversation between states. But for the new domains, especially cyber and information, and perhaps subsea and space, it's actually a multi-stakeholder conversation. What is the role of big tech companies in this conversation? They have much more capability than many states. How do we include them in these non-state actors in our conversations? Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. From China, Shishong Sheng.
Thank you very much, Director General. And we all know the Shangri-La dialogue is an important forum to exchange ideas and seek common points while resolving differences. So my question goes to the three speakers. In recent years, the militarization of emerging domains such as the cyberspace, deep sea, and outer space has accelerated, which undermines the common security of all nations and pose a common challenge to the international community. So in your views, how should the international community resolve differences to promote the vision of a community with a shared future for humankind in those domains and establish open multilateral mechanisms to effectively address these challenges? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next I will take from the IISS and working a lot on cyber issues and other technology issues. Virpatap Vikram Singh. Virpatap.
Thank you, Bastian. I have two questions for the panel. The first is, are your countries developing strategies and doctrines that can better reflect the holistic nature of cyberspace, where threats to it can come not only from offensive actions in cyberspace, on the internet, but as well as physical disruptions to satellite systems as well as undersea cables. The second question is a little bit similar to one of the questions that was just asked, but historically, outside of armed conflict, states have used cyber operations as a tool for de-escalation in conventional crises. Given the current geopolitical environment that we face with multiple crises taking place and the increasing normalization of cyber operations as an integral part not only of conflict but of the military domain, what avenues do you and your countries see for de-escalation, and what new avenues might need to be created? Thank you.
Thank you very much. From Japan and the Young Leaders Program, Riho Aizawa.
Thank you very much. Questions about security in the Pacific Islands region. So Chinese undersea cable initiatives in this region raise not only economic but also security concerns. So beyond this, the region faces a range of broader security challenges. In this context, are there specific areas where Japan or other regional countries can meaningfully contribute to the regional stability? Or rather than having both our countries engage broadly across the Pacific, might a division of labor be a more effective approach, like US, Japan focuses on more Micronesia, Australia, France with Melanesia, New Zealand, UK, France with Polynesia?
Thank you very much. I'll take three more in this round. The next one also from the Young Leaders Group and from Australia, Matthew DeLeo.
Thank you. This is for the whole panel. Earlier today, we discussed traditional arms control and the need to redouble efforts towards transparency and accountability measures between states. To what extent is this possible in the cyber domain, and how do cyber tools and weapons contribute to deterrence, especially if they remain opaque and deniable?
Thank you very much. And from Vietnam, Ha An Tuan.
Thank you very much. My question goes to all the three panelists. So we all agree today that there are increasing challenges in cyber, undersea, and outer space challenges. So what can the US, China, and other countries in the region can do to build up a kind of global governance in these matters? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last one in this round, John Chipman. John.
Thank you. New Zealand said it's doubling its budget in 4 years. France said we can be defeated in war without being at war. And Finland has said that space has become a domain of strategic competition. As all three of you look at expanding your defense budgets in order to deal with these new domain challenges, what proportion of your defense budgets will go into brand new defense technologies as opposed to the typical platforms of tanks, ships, and planes?
John, thank you very much. Just to let the ministers know, there's a dozen other people who also are seeking the floor, and the list keeps growing. So we'll see whether we can get another round in, but maybe we'll address some of these 7 or 8 points that were raised now. Judith, I'll start with you. I mean, everything was pretty much addressed to the panel overall, so maybe you'll pick 3 or 4 of the ones that you'd like to address.
Thank you very much. I've made a couple of notes as everyone was speaking. I think one of the things that we'd say is that one of the questions was around traditional arms and the whole arms control system. To be frank, it actually relied on the threat of mutual destruction, and we haven't quite got there. But I do think that ended up. Countries like ours ended up being slight beneficiaries of the fact that larger powers could destroy themselves and each other, and so therefore we didn't have to get involved in that area. But look, I think there are huge opportunities for bigger tech as well as small tech, and so from New Zealand's point of view, we have a lot of very small but very innovative tech businesses. I know that Finland and France would have probably bigger ones too, but very involved in this. I think there are opportunities for us to use this to grow our defence industry base. And so much of what we've seen being used in the newer technologies in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, is actually dual use. So it starts off civilian and it then ends up becoming military. Not because people want it to, but because there is no choice. And that's what you have to do when you have to defend yourself. So I think we're very open to that. I think we talked, there were some questions around cables, undersea cables, what to do. Well, number one, if you've got a ship that's parked over top of your cable, and your cable, I mean, you've got to take some action really, don't you? And that your cable is at risk. But one of the best things I think we can do is what Sebastian said, is that we need to attribute wherever possible. We've made some attributions this last year for various cyber attacks, massive cyber attacks that we've been under, and we will do so again. And I think that's really important. Transparency is needed, so there's none of this hiding behind the skirts. It's actually getting out there and saying, this is what's happened, and we know who's done it. We've made those very non-political decisions. We've made those through our security agencies, and they have made them, and we've backed them up for doing it. And if people don't like us doing it, I suggest they stop doing what they're doing, and then I won't do it anymore. So it's pretty obvious. So I think we all face very similar situations. There was a question around the US Golden Dome.
Golden Dome, yeah.
Golden Dome, and whether or not that might escalate things. It's a defence mechanism. I don't see it as an attack mechanism. It's a defence mechanism. And if people didn't feel they needed to defend themselves, they wouldn't waste the money on it. Taxpayer money is hard fought for. Let me tell you, we're defence ministers. We know how that feels. We have to go in every day and try and get more money. And we're not going to do it unless there's some reason to do it. So, you know, don't be aggressive in space. We won't need golden domes or any other sort of dome. I think that's probably pretty much it. And I'm going to pass on to the others because I know that the others will want to ask some questions. Unless you think I should deal with one.
Do you want to give a percentage of spending that will go on?
Well, I'd say it's relatively small at the moment, but it's going to grow. And so when we know that some of the technology that our New Zealand innovators are building is now being used in Ukraine, so it's now battle proven, we're going to be using more of that too. And we have to, with a maritime domain that is so large for a country with the population of Alabama, we've got to use new technology. So you're going to be seeing more of it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Sébastien.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais essayer d'être...
Thank you very much. I will try to be brief. I give you time to put your headset on. So we'll start with John's question. Where does the money go? That's a real debate. You speak intrinsically about 3%, 4% of the GDP, 5% of GDP, at least for the NATO member countries. It would be amazing to ask the taxpayers to spend even more money to win the war of yesterday. And that's a new time. Florence Parly, when she launched the first increase in the defense budget in 21-22, that was to repair. Today, we transform. That means making choices. And these choices need to be tailor-made depending on the countries. France is in west of Europe, not in Eastern Europe. It's in the north of Africa. And it is a nuclear power. And these new areas of confrontations are an even stronger priority because we are further, because we are nuclear power, because it's a way to attack us under this nuclear threshold. So the main part of our effort will rely on these technological leaps. Artificial intelligence is disrupting us. Quantum, military quantum domain will be brutal, totally brutal for all our defense system. Absolutely brutal, because it will be a revolution which will be stronger than that of computers or the apparition of the military use of atom. I'm absolutely certain of that. So we will have to juggle to regulate between conventional weapons, mass, robust weapons, and at the same time financing innovation. If I come back to the other questions, the question of China, thank you for this question about the militarization of the new environments and especially of the space domain. Several answers, to be quite candid. We are a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, both China and France, but I think that if we still believe in the United Nations, the major powers as us should show the good example, respecting law, refusing this militarization which would not be controlled, and do that without taboo. If powers such as permanent member of the UN Security Council do not give an example, we will not be able to request from other countries to follow that. I don't think that we need to invent something new. Your question was, do we need new mechanisms? I think that if we just abide by what already exists, we would have less problems today. And I would like to add a third point to answer your question. Not play too much around this duality issue. You see that these new areas require a lot of thinking about duality between civilian and military assets. So let's not hide behind civilian topics to go to military domain. So that's the duty of the permanent member of the United Nations Security Council to show the example. Regarding the Golden Dome, I didn't have the opportunity to speak with Secretary of Defense except yet. Judith is right to say it's defensive. That's true. And in the information field, we see that a lot of things exist saying that it would be an escalation. Yes, it is defensive. But I'm a defense minister of nuclear power. I would not be honest if I didn't tell you that nuclear weapon owning countries accept vulnerability against another such nuclear state. That's the very principle of deterrence. It's this balance. So it's true that during the Cold War, if you like history, whenever a country toughened its defense system, the other toughened their penetration capability. That's a fact. That's history. Now we have to look at this program, what it means in terms of technology, of nuclear deterrence. Let's not fall into a too journalistic approach. We need to be very accurate. We need to try and see what it means. And I would really like us to be able to have a P3 debate with the Americans and the United Kingdom, the three nuclear states of Europe, of the NATO, sorry. You see that we hear what President Trump says, but this program would last way beyond his mandate. So it's a good topic of discussion and reflection. And what about these cyber tools? Are they tools for de-escalation? In such a disrupted world, we could think that all these topics are less serious than shooting with real bullets on civilians or even soldiers, that it's less serious than missile strikes, that it's less serious than an air raid. That's debatable. It's debatable because if a cyber attack on a hospital, it's an event, a cyber attack on 300, 400 hospitals at the same time, it's an act of war and not just a de-escalation tool, but it will cause escalation. So you see that we need to progress in our reflection. Attribution, self-defense, legitimate self-defense. When do you really feel attacked or questioned about something which is new, maybe softer in appearance, but which in time could cause a totally irreversible escalation? And I do wish that free, independent countries refusing this logic of blocks can come around the table to discuss about that. Because like our forefathers who tried to regulate a number of security challenges which were new during the Cold War, our generation of military, of politicians, of diplomats, of think tank members will have to think about these regulatory tools. That was the notion of governments also asked by, I think, the representative of Vietnam. I think we should not be afraid of not being that many at the beginning. What is important is what comes at the end.
Well, thank you. Just shortly, a couple of remarks after Sebastian's good answers and Judy's good answers about the militarization of new domains. Of course, into these new domains, we need responsible actions and joint rules for international. But the main pillar is that some countries are not obeying the international rules even this day to the conventional warfare, for example, with Russia and their allies and supporters. So that's why it's quite important to support international rule-based order because we need jointly these new domains also into the sphere of new rules and that everyone are obeying them. Just shortly about this cyber and de-escalation. From the point of defense, always to prevent war or physical war, you need deterrence and some clear kind of thresholds. And in the cyber world, I think it would be beneficial for all the parties, also some adversaries, to have some clear deterrence lines. Because now in the cyber world, there's no that kind of deterrence lines. There's ongoing cyber attacks all the time. Provocations and cyber attacks with state actors. Like I said in my speech, state actors which are using criminal organizations and we know it, and we most obviously know who did it. So this is a challenge that we need to have some kind of a deterrence in the cyber world and in the hybrid world. The attribution is only one part of that solution. New technology will bring solutions because that will bring easier tools to do the attribution. For example, in the undersea cables, we are increasing now so much sensors that the actor will get caught. For example, also in the cybersecurity, there's a lot of new technologies and AI that we can get caught the actor and the criminal organization much easier now. But where comes the threshold, there comes the deterrence line also in the hybrid world. And this is the key pillar. And I think it would be beneficial for all the parties that not escalate the cyber warfare. And about the cyber warfare, just shortly, in Finnish perspective, we have a lot of cyber experience and all the companies and universities that we have done this two-pillar cyber security that there's an overall approach in the society in comprehensive security model that all the civil organizations and companies have their own tasks and they are buying their security softwares from the companies, but we are surveilling that they are sufficient. And then we are now developing our cyber defense to support in the worst case scenarios with, for example, hospitals and those security actions. And also in the NATO, there's a cyber defense in countermeasures also. And about this satellites and cyber, I think about the budget process, that's a challenging task to ask because those are civil companies. So we are trying to do defense industrial change that the dual-use technologies is a normal kind of industry policy. That would be really wise because we cannot take all the defense industry and technological development burden to defense ministerial kind of share. That's why all the civil ministries, industry ministries and technology ministers, they have to know that these dual-use technologies are highly important for security and also the economic growth, of course. That's why, for example, we have new highly growing satellite companies in Finland, IISS, Reorbit and all, which are also operating in the Indo-Pacific area. But we are pushing forward at the military side, but they have to go with the civil side with their own forces.
Thank you very much. We've got a few minutes left, so we will take a few more interventions, and then we have a concluding round here from the panel. So if I may start from the Young Leaders Group and from Malaysia, Daniel Abdul Rahman. Oops, sorry, I was a bit fast here. If we can please get the tech to go back one. Daniel Abdul Rahman, if we can please activate that microphone. Well, we'll come back to that in a second. Here we go. There we go. Okay, I think you're live now, Daniel.
Thank you very much. Two quick questions. First, related to Undersea, is the deep sea mining challenge. Here you go. Last year, the EU rebuked Norway for allowing some exploration within Antarctica, and in July this year, the International Seabed Authority is supposed to come up, or at least some kind of conclusion to a multi-year regulations on exploitation. So I'm wondering what the current progress on that is. The second one related to that is Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia are also sitting on what is said to be rich deposits of minerals in deep mining, which could potentially inflame further the South China Sea dispute, because some of these areas are already under disputed territories. What are your thoughts on the role that the Indo-Pacific partners can play in this? Last very quick one also is, between cyber, undersea, and outer space, how would you prioritize the three, if at all? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Douglas Greenlaw from the US.
Yeah, thank you, Bastian. This question is directed to any of the panelists. Space-based capabilities are now integral to all domains of military operations and to a myriad of civil and economic operations. Concerningly, kinetic warfare in space has the potential to escalate debris in a way that the space domain is no longer useful. This is called the Kessler effect. How do we establish effective international norms and behaviors to avoid this calamity?
Thank you, Doug. From the UK and the IISS, Charlie Edwards.
Thank you, Bastian. My question is to the Minister of Defence for Finland. As you mentioned, deterrence. Given that Russian hybrid warfare in Europe, which ranges, as you suggest, from infrastructure attacks to disinformation and to potential assassination, constitute deliberate hostile acts of statecraft, can you comment on why Europe is finding it so challenging to develop and implement a credible deterrent strategy in response?
Thank you very much, and I'll put Antti on notice that we'll go in reverse order when we turn to responses, so you'll go first. Last one, before I'll invite the ministers for concluding thoughts from Vietnam, Tran.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Minister Collins of the New Zealand. So I see that there's a linkage between space and maritime security because, advanced satellite technologies can help to detect dark vessel and unusual ship movements along the routes of subsea cables. So I wonder whether New Zealand sees maritime domain awareness as a public good and intend to, help the regional countries to enhance their capabilities to monitor and respond to threat at seas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're coming up. We've got 4 minutes left. So we'll give the ministers each a minute and a half to offer concluding thoughts and responses to these questions. Antti, there was a particular question to you, which we would appreciate an answer on. Why is it so hard to deal with this? Obviously, Finland has experience there, but then offer any concluding thoughts on any of the other issues. Antti.
So, yeah, thank you very much. This is really good question about hybrid warfare from Russia in Europe. Several measures instrumentalizing migration to some assassination or something like that. Why Europe hasn't attributed and done some conclusions and maybe sanctions or counteractions during last 25 years, because Russia has done it, and during the Cold War also. I think there was a mentality quite long that we just have to do some kind of appeasement in Europe, that just to think that this will go over and just do the trade and buy the energy from Russia and that way. But now when Russia has shown their cards, full attack to Ukraine, increasing hybrid warfare all around Europe. So I think that now Europe is waking and it's going in the right direction. But the main lessons learned from last 20 years about how to counter hybrid warfare in your region is that draw the red line somewhere. If you're just watching that and doing the appeasement and doing economic trade, the threat will grow and grow and grow on because they think that you can go further and further and further and you don't have any red lines. And now I think that many of the European politicians really know that we have to have red lines in normal warfare, but also in the hybrid warfare.
Thank you very much, Sebastian.
Pour respecter le temps.
To respect the time that allotted to me, there were two questions. The first one about mine warfare. I think that time is not only to think, but also to act. That's the choice we made with a number of partners, mine warfare ships, development of robotics, sensors. And now it might be the specificity of the deep seabed. It's still a physical field, newly accessible, but that remains a physical domain in which action is possible. So I will join the answer I gave John Chapman about the hierarchy of choices. Of course, this is a capability on which we will have to develop, to produce, and they will probably be quite successful to be bought by countries in your area. You will all need protection. Second question, what is the priority in the three domains? Not an easy question. Of course, countries which have no sea, well, for them the problem is quite solved. But we can consider that space is far and cyber is daily life. It's true until, and I can answer the second question, until there is a huge security incident in space, and then it's worldwide, and that will all mankind which will suffer the consequences that will be unique in history. So there is something, we target this cyber, and it's very worldwide, indiscriminated in space. And that is one of the elements which enable us to work in the diplomatic domain, because in the end, no major country, even small countries, should see even a single country do something crazy in space. Follow my lead. So once space gets useless because, for instance, a nuclear bomb has exploded in space, there will be so many debris that space will no longer be usable. And since no country in the world is totally alone, once one country does that, it means that the states deciding not to deter this country will be guilty about it. So that's why we have to talk to all the stakeholders. I'm, of course, thinking about Russia.
I can ask you to offer concluding thoughts, but also address that maritime domain awareness point that was put to you.
Thank you very much. So from Vietnam, the maritime domain awareness, and will New Zealand help other countries on this? Yes, we will. We're very aware that we are all connected in the Asia-Pacific, particularly region where we can contribute. Yes, we will help with that. If I can just say one other thing. Look, there's a few things from some of the questions I thought, which was, rules are made for people who want to keep them. And they're not made for people who don't think they apply to them, that they are above the law. And so this is one of the problems we have. But we should also remember, and I think one of the messages from Finland is that you cannot trade your way into peace if the people you're trading with have no interest in you other than what they can take from you. So we need to understand appeasement has never worked in the world. It's never going to work now. Human nature is very strong, but what we can do is we can do our very best to make it people's worthwhile for actors, state actors and others to obey the rules of the road. And international rules-based order, it works for us, it works for every other country who wants to just live within their borders, do well, trade with each other, and be happy that everyone's doing well, instead of trying to take over other countries. So, yeah, yes, we will help. And, yeah, thank you very much for it. It's been a great, great session.
Thank you very much. Splendid. Excellent. Thank you very much. We will conclude the fourth plenary session at this moment. We'll have a short coffee break, and then our special sessions will kick off at 5 p.m. So let me invite you to thank the three ministers for their excellent contributions.